Who will win this war? US or Iran? Every major outlet has covered this conflict. Every think tank has published a report. Every commentator has given you their take, and almost all of them are asking the wrong question.
I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply, and if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level.
This is a war imposed on us. And what we are doing is only defending ourselves.
The question everyone is asking is, who has the bigger military? That question has an obvious answer, and it tells you almost nothing about how this ends. Maybe the only one in this conflict with a strategy that actually works. And most coverage hasn't noticed, because it doesn't fit a headline. In this video, we're going to answer 4 questions that most analysis never reaches. Why did Iran's largest ever attack on Israel, the one the world called a failure, may have actually succeeded? Why is Israel's most dangerous vulnerability not on any military map, and why is almost nobody in Western media talking about it? What is the single event that would push this conflict past the point of no return, and how close are we to it right now? And who actually wins? Not on paper. In reality, when you account for everything. But to get there, we need to start with the context almost every breakdown skips. Because this conflict didn't begin when the first missile launched. It began the moment someone decided they were wronged and never forgot it. To understand what's actually happening right now, you have to go back to 1979. Because most conflicts don't start the moment the first bomb drops. They start the moment someone decides they were wronged, and never forgets it. When Iran's Islamic Revolution overthrew the US-backed Shah, America didn't just lose an ally. It lost its entire strategic foothold in the Middle East. And Iran? Iran gained something far more durable than oil fields or military hardware. It gained an ideology, a narrative, a reason to exist in opposition. Never underestimate that. Most people frame this as a military problem. Tanks versus tanks, missiles versus missile defense, F-35s versus drones. But when you actually dig into the research, you find something most mainstream coverage won't say clearly. If this conflict escalates, it won't be fought in one dimension. It will be fought in 5 simultaneously, and only one of them involves conventional weapons. Dimension 1. Military force. Yes, this matters. We'll get to the numbers. Dimension 2. Economic warfare, oil, sanctions, and global supply chains. Dimension 3. Cyber. Invisible, deniable, and potentially more consequential than any missile. Dimension 4. Proxy networks. The pieces already positioned across 7 countries, waiting. Dimension 5. Domestic instability. The threat that lives inside your own borders. Whoever masters the most dimensions wins, not whoever has the most missiles. And here is why those 5 dimensions matter far beyond the Middle East itself. Each one of them connects directly to the interests of the world's largest powers. Powers that are not neutral observers, they are active participants. Russia has deepened its military and economic ties with Tehran. China is quietly buying Iranian oil through a shadow fleet of tankers that disappear from tracking systems the moment they leave port. What looks like a regional conflict is a proxy theater for a global contest of influence, and every major power is watching very carefully to see who blinks first. Chapter 1. The military reality. Let's start with what everyone wants to know first. Who wins in a straight fight? On paper, it's not even a contest. By every conventional metric, the US-Israel alliance wins. Comfortably. But here is the thing about metrics. They measure what happened before. They say nothing about what is about to happen. America learned this in Vietnam. Then again in Afghanistan. The world's most powerful military, defeated not by a superior enemy, but by an inferior one that refused to lose on America's terms. Iran has studied that playbook for 40 years, and they have added chapters America has not read yet. Iran's military doctrine was never designed to match the West in a conventional exchange. It was built around three concepts: deterrence, attrition, and asymmetry. Deterrence, making the cost of attacking so high that your enemy hesitates until they rationalize doing nothing. Attrition, grinding the enemy down over months and years, stretching resources, public support, and political will. Asymmetry, never fighting on their terms, always forcing them onto yours. In April 2024, Iran launched over 300 drones and ballistic missiles at Israel in a single night, the first direct attack from Iranian soil in history. Most were intercepted, but here is what almost no analyst said clearly. Iran was not trying to destroy Israel that night. They were conducting a very expensive, very public stress test of Israeli air defenses. They were counting interceptors, mapping response times, identifying gaps. That is not a failed attack. That is reconnaissance, dressed as retaliation. And that distinction matters enormously for understanding what comes next. And then there is Iran's distributed military, the one that does not appear on any conventional order of battle. In Lebanon, Hezbollah maintains an estimated 150,000 rockets pointed at Israel. In Yemen, Houthi forces have disrupted one of the world's most critical shipping corridors for months. In Iraq and Syria, Iranian-backed militias can mass and disperse before a satellite achieves a targeting fix. This is Iran's real military force multiplier. And here is the strategic reality it creates. You cannot win a war against a network by bombing its nodes. Destroy one, and the network routes around it. Chapter 2: The Economic Dimension. Here is a fact that changes everything about how this conflict looks. Iran, the country that has been under crippling Western economic sanctions for decades, is now an arms exporter. It manufactures its own drones, its own ballistic missiles, its own military electronics, and it sells them. To Russia, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis. The country that was supposed to be economically strangled has become a weapons manufacturer. Let that sit for a moment. How? Because 40 years of sanctions forced Iran to build everything domestically. It had no choice. And in doing so, it accidentally created a military-industrial base that no longer depends on Western supply chains in the ways that make sanctions fatal. Sanctions still cause severe damage to Iran's civilian economy. Inflation, unemployment, currency collapse, these are real and ongoing. But the military-industrial core adapted, quietly, over decades, and it is now exporting. And then there is the Strait of Hormuz. 21 million barrels of oil pass through that choke point every single day, roughly 1/5 of global supply. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, all of their exports move through those waters. As energy security analysts have consistently warned, if Iran were to close the strait, even temporarily, the economic consequences would extend well beyond the region. Oil prices could spike sharply, and that pressure would reach consumers across Europe and North America within weeks. This is why the United States, even with the most powerful military in human history, has to calculate very carefully before any escalation in that region. Because the cost of winning is not paid in the conflict zone. It is paid at every fuel pump and every grocery store in the Western world. And democratic governments answer to the people paying those prices. And China makes all of this considerably more complicated. In 2023, Iran exported an estimated 1.5 million barrels of oil per day, primarily to China, through a shadow fleet of tankers that disable their tracking systems, transfer cargo mid-ocean, and deliver to refineries through chains of intermediary companies specifically designed to obscure the origin. So when Washington discusses economically isolating Iran, it needs to answer one question first. Isolated from whom exactly? Chapter 3: The War Already Happening. Here is something most news programs will not say directly, because it does not fit a breaking news format. This conflict has already started. It is being fought in ways most people cannot see, and in ways that both sides maintain plausible deniability over. In 2010, a piece of software called Stuxnet, as documented in detail by security journalist Kim Zetter and reported extensively by the New York Times, physically destroyed Iranian nuclear centrifuges. Not with explosives. With code that caused the machines to malfunction while simultaneously feeding false data to their operators. So the operators believed everything was running normally while the centrifuges tore themselves apart. It was the first documented case of a digital weapon causing real-world physical destruction. Iran paid very close attention. Since then, Iranian cyber units have targeted Israeli water infrastructure, United States government networks, Saudi oil facilities, and financial institutions across the Western world. These are not allegations. They are incidents documented by the United States Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and confirmed by multiple independent cybersecurity firms. Iranian cyber capability has not stood still. It has advanced significantly, and it now represents a genuine fourth dimension threat, exactly as the framework from the opening of this video predicted. The shadow conflict runs deeper than cyber operations. Between 2010 and 2012, at least 5 Iranian nuclear scientists were killed in targeted attacks, incidents documented by international journalists and attributed by multiple intelligence analysts, though never officially claimed by any government. In January 2020, the United States killed General Qasem Soleimani, the architect of Iran's entire proxy network, in a drone strike at Baghdad airport. Iran's supreme leader described it publicly as an act of war. In July 2024, Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed inside Tehran in a guest house during a presidential inauguration ceremony. The operation has been widely attributed to Israeli intelligence by international analysts and journalists, though Israel has not officially confirmed it. As regional security analysts observed at the time, the strategic message carried by that operation, executed inside the Iranian capital itself, was that no location falls outside the reach of those willing to act. Iran's response was the October 2024 ballistic missile barrage, approximately 200 missiles targeting Israeli military infrastructure. A significant escalation from the April drone salvo. A different category of weapon. A different level of intent communicated. This is the pattern that has defined this conflict for years. Escalation. Counter-escalation. Neither side crossing the final threshold. Both sides moving steadily closer to it. Which brings us to the most important question in this video. What would actually push this past the point of no return? The answer lies in what analysts call the wildcards, 3 that are already in motion, and 1 that overrides all of them. Chapter 4. The factors most coverage misses. If you judge this conflict purely on military and economic data, the US-Israel alliance wins. Probably, eventually. But history is full of eventuallys that never arrived. Each of the wildcards we are about to cover connects directly back to one of the 5 dimensions introduced earlier, because this framework is not theoretical. It is playing out in real time. 3 supporting wildcards, then the one that overrides all of them. Wildcard 1. Iran's domestic fractures. The Iranian government is not universally supported by its own population. That is not a political opinion. It is documented across years of sustained protest movements. The 2022 Woman Life Freedom Uprising, triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini in morality police custody, shook the regime more deeply than it publicly acknowledged. Young Iranians, educated and globally connected, took to the streets in cities across the country. The government's response was severe. But the underlying grievances did not disappear. They went underground. A prolonged conflict, with mounting military casualties, deepening economic pain, and strikes on Iranian cities, could reignite those tensions rapidly. Nationalism is a powerful short-term adhesive under external threat, but it does not hold indefinitely against a regime that is visibly losing ground. Dimension 5 is not a future risk. It is already in motion. Wildcard 2. Israel's internal divisions. This wildcard is almost entirely absent from Western coverage, and it may be one of the most strategically significant factors in the entire conflict. Israel is not a unified country right now. In the year before October 7th, 2023, Israel was experiencing its deepest internal political crisis in decades. Hundreds of thousands of citizens, including serving military reservists, were actively protesting against the government's proposed judicial overhaul. The Hamas attack temporarily consolidated national unity. That is the historical pattern under external threat. But nearly 2 years on, with the conflict in Gaza ongoing, hostages still unaccounted for, and Israel's international standing under sustained pressure, those internal divisions are visibly re-emerging. A democracy cannot sustain a multi-front war against a patient adversary over years while simultaneously managing a domestic political crisis. That is not a political observation. That is a documented strategic constraint. Wildcard 3. The nuclear threshold. Wildcard 3. The one most analysis avoids stating with precision. According to data published by the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran is currently enriching uranium to approximately 60% purity. Weapons grade is defined as 90%. The IAEA has reported that Iran now holds enough enriched material that, if it chose to enrich further, it could theoretically produce fissile material for a nuclear device within a time frame that is compressed significantly from previous estimates. This is what analysts call breakout time, and that window has narrowed considerably. Here is the strategic consequence that makes this wildcard different from all the others. The moment Iran crosses that threshold, it cannot be uncrossed. The calculus of the entire region changes, permanently, irreversibly, which creates a brutal but logical pressure. If Israel or the United States intends to act militarily to prevent Iran reaching that point, the window in which that action remains meaningful may be closing. And closed windows have a way of forcing decisions that no one is fully prepared to make. The overriding wildcard. Public opinion at scale. Now, the wildcard that overrides all three of those. The one that can make every military advantage, every economic lever, every proxy network, irrelevant. Public opinion. At global scale. We live in a world where a mobile phone can document events in a conflict zone and distribute that footage to hundreds of millions of people within hours. Governments can fund wars, but they cannot indefinitely fund wars that their populations actively and continuously oppose. The conflict in Gaza, regardless of your political position on it, has produced documented shifts in Western public opinion that are directly constraining what democratic governments can authorize, fund, and sustain politically. The longer any conflict continues, the tighter that constraint becomes. This connects back to every single dimension in the framework. It limits military options. It shapes economic decisions. It constrains cyber operations that require political cover. It undermines proxy strategies that depend on public legitimacy. This is not an abstract moral observation. It is a hard strategic ceiling, and it is the one factor that no missile system, no cyber operation, and no proxy network can neutralize. Chapter 5. Who actually wins? So, after all of that, who wins? Here is the honest answer. In a short, high-intensity conventional conflict, the US-Israel alliance wins militarily. Almost certainly. The firepower differential is too large for any other outcome in the short term. But here is what that conclusion misses completely. Iran's strategy has never been to win a conventional war. It has been to make winning one so economically painful, so regionally destabilizing, and so politically costly for Western domestic populations that the other side eventually concludes the victory was not worth the price. This is the lesson of Lebanon in 2006. Israel won militarily. Hezbollah survived. A decade later, Hezbollah had more weapons, more fighters, and more regional influence than before the war began. This is the lesson of Iraq. The United States dismantled Saddam Hussein's conventional forces in 3 weeks. 2 decades later, Iranian-backed groups hold substantial political influence inside the Iraqi government. Military victory and strategic victory are not the same thing. They never were. Remember the 4 questions from the start? Iran's largest attack, the one the world called a failure. It was a stress test. They were counting interceptors, mapping response times, identifying gaps, not a failed assault. Reconnaissance. Israel's biggest vulnerability, not on any map. The domestic fractures that make multi-front, multi-year warfare politically unsustainable for a democracy under sustained international scrutiny. The event that crosses the point of no return, a nuclear threshold. Because it cannot be undone. And the window to prevent it is narrowing in real time. And who actually wins? What we are watching is not the buildup to a decisive battle. It is the slow entrenchment of a new kind of conflict, fought in shadows, through proxies, through economics, through information, punctuated by moments of terrifying conventional violence. And the people who pay the price, as always, are the ones who never started it. The civilians. On every side. 5 dimensions. 4 wildcards. 1 overriding constraint. Which of those dimensions do you think is the most underreported in mainstream coverage of this conflict? The one that gets the least attention relative to how much it actually matters? Leave your answer below. Next time, how the outcome of this conflict could permanently redraw the map of the Middle East, and why what happens in the next 12 months in Tehran may matter more to your daily life than anything happening in any Western capital. See you there.